A plan to get rid of a cheating husband. You've heard of the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, this is the story of the broken bra strap that finally destroyed a marriage. Although in many ways I, Denise, was an ordinary 32-year-old woman at the time of the bra strap breakage, I had and still have two distinguishing characteristics. First, I am fit and exercise regularly, including jogging. Second, I have large breasts. I have to wear special bras at all times to function properly. I met my husband Jack when I was 22 years old. He is 6 years older than me and very handsome, almost too handsome for his own good. He can also be charming, although my father, a well-known lawyer, always thought he was slick rather than charming. Jack really liked my breasts, and I think he liked me too. At least it seemed that way to me. Because my father thought Jack was slick, and I know from experience that my father was right 99% of the time in his assessments of people. At my father's insistence, Jack and I kept our finances separate, including filing separate tax returns after we married when I was 24 and he was 30. That turned out to be very fortunate when Jack was arrested for fraud after we'd been married about 3 years. Nothing he did could have had anything to do with me, although it seemed like the local cops wanted to bring me in. However, after my father finished beating up the district attorney, the cops apologized to me for insulting me during the investigation. I graciously accepted their apology and then let them know that if they subpoenaed any more of my records, I would sue the city and them personally for harassment. Thanks to his cherubic face, his sincere expression of remorse, the state's savings on court costs, and a female judge, Jack was sentenced to only 4 years, with the possibility of parole in 2. The attorney fees cost him all his money. Mine remained untouched, except that I insisted that my father's law firm pick up the cost of my defense. Thus, I remained responsible for the mortgage on our house. My parents wanted me to divorce Jack, but I really loved the guy despite all his problems, so I had a heart-to-heart talk with him instead of filing for divorce right away. "Jack, tell me why I should stay behind you," I asked him after his conviction, but 10 days before he was due to report to the white-collar prison where he was to serve his sentence. "You're my rock, Denise. I need you to survive. I love you very much, and I'll be a new man when I get out. Please be patient. I know you love me too," he replied, looking at me with his big, sad, tantalizing eyes. "Yes, but love alone may not be enough. How will I be able to keep a house on my earnings alone, and what will I do to fulfill my needs while you are in shock?" I replied, folding my arms. "Look, I know it's a lot to ask, but I guarantee you that I'll be released early in 2 years. In more stressful situations, wives wait longer for their husbands going off to war. Please, you have to be by my side." "It only has to be 2 years, Jack. I can't take 4, and I won't make it. You have to do whatever it takes to get out after 2. If you do that and agree to sign the papers for me to sell the house if things get tight, I'll stay with you." "Thank you, Denise. I love you so much," he purred. He then picked me up in his arms, carried me to our bedroom, and we made love. We had sex at least twice a day until I had to take him to jail. That should have been enough for 2 years because I wasn't going to cheat and he couldn't. I cried when I dropped him off and almost had several accidents on the way home because of the tears in my eyes. Thankfully, my best friend Jill was not only very understanding of my situation, but was willing to help me. So when I got back to my house, I was greeted by Jill and 2 other friends. They took me out for a late lunch and a play, and I was able to take my mind off my problems for a while. Jack's time in prison was harder on me than I would have guessed for several reasons. In no particular order, it was the things that made it hard. First, the loneliness at night when we were usually doing things together. I dealt with this partly by getting even closer to Jill and 2 other friends, but primarily by increasing my exercise. I became a regular at my fitness club and the local running and biking paths. While I had always been at least in decent shape before Jack's incarceration, with my new workout regimen and the time I was devoting to fitness, I was clearly not only in the best shape of my life, but, according to my female trainer, in the top 2% of women in the entire country. The second problem was finances. I ended up having to sell the house. Fortunately, we had about $100,000 left, so after expenses, commissions, and the like, I was able to put $35,000 in my brokerage account and $35,000 in Jack's bank account, and the condo I bought I could well afford on my income alone. Third, temptation. Guys had always found me attractive. I don't think it was just because of my large breasts, but it was certainly a factor, and now there was no exception, even though I always wore a wedding and engagement ring. In fact, my exercise regimen made me the most attractive I had ever been in my life, and even though I dressed conservatively, I was constantly being hit on. At the grocery store, at the health club, at work, at the mall, even just walking down the street. It was only through sheer willpower that I was able to avoid cheating on Jack. The fourth, and most frightening, was how Jack had changed. Although Jack had always shown concern, he had never been clingy or overly jealous. That changed dramatically while he was in a state of attraction to me. It started shortly after I first visited him. Even though he was 150 miles away, I traveled to see him every Sunday for at least 2 hours. I, and no doubt my breasts, were noticed by other inmates as I met Jack in the common room where families gathered. It was clear to me that some of the other inmates were telling him that there was no way someone who looked like me could avoid all the guys who were sure to hit on me. With each stop, Jack became more and more jealous and accusatory. It got to the point that by the end of each visit, I was completely exhausted and no longer looked forward to them. Finally, after he had been in prison for about 14 months, I had had enough. When he made some snide remark about how I must be being properly serviced because I looked so good, I lashed out at him. "Look, asshole, I'm sick of your snide remarks and baseless accusations. I've had a really hard time staying loyal, and if you remember, I'm not the one who cheated people and got here, you are. So the next time you make some offhand remark questioning my fidelity, I'm going to go have sex with the entire soccer team." With those words, I toppled my metal chair onto the concrete floor and ran out, making as much of a scene as I could. During the next weekly phone call that Jack allowed, he apologized to me, although it sounded a bit hollow since it was said in terms of "take pity on poor me," but I accepted it. I made it clear that I wasn't going to put up with any more of his nonsense. For the rest of his visits until he was released, after 22 months, which is even less than 2 years, he mostly stayed out of his binge, although I did see him biting his lip at times. When Jack came home, we made love for about a week straight. I took a few days off from work, and we made love most of the time until we ate and slept. However, after our first week of sex, Jack was not in the best of spirits. His work opportunities were now limited. He was used to earning close to 6 figures, and now, with his fraud conviction, which clearly bothered most potential employers, the only job he could get, he considered beneath him. His ego was hurt by the fact that I was earning 4 times as much as he was, even though I was paying the mortgage, taxes, and condo fees alone. Probably because of his dire financial situation, bruised ego, and lingering thoughts of jealousy and accusations left over from his time in prison, it became unpleasant to live with him 6 months after he got out. It got to the point where only sex, which was still very good, made it bearable. I began to seriously consider divorce. Then came the bra strap incident. Saturday morning, I went out for a run wearing one of my old strapless jogging bras with only a sleeveless top over it, and I sprinted about 100 meters trying to clear my mind of thoughts of divorce. My boldly bouncing large breasts had apparently gotten too big for the old bra, and the halter snapped. It was unexpected, startling, and painful. The snapping of the bra caused welts on my back and sides, and my breasts ached from the sudden release. Then there was the embarrassment when my left breast popped completely out of the sleeveless bra. Of course, this happened in the most crowded part of the treadmill, and I almost hit a guy walking in the opposite direction when I fully realized my position out of fright. Luckily, the guy I almost hit and collided with was large enough that I didn't flatten him, and he also happened to be a gentleman. "Sorry," I exclaimed, crashing into him. "I'm just having a major closet malfunction." "I can tell," he grinned, seeming to make eye contact with me while simultaneously admiring my left breast. "It doesn't look like you can keep wearing that outfit without becoming an object of attraction for every guy in the neighborhood. Can I offer to help?" "What kind?" I asked skeptically, stuffing my left breast back into the sleeveless top and carefully removing the useless bra. "I just started jogging about half a kilometer back. Take my shirt," he said, pulling off a still-soaking t-shirt with the proud inscription Northwestern University Volleyball and the college seal. "Put this on and I'll give you a ride to the car if you want, since I'm not sure if you'll be running right now." He had obviously gotten a good look at my breasts to make that assessment because, in fact, if I continued to run without a firm bra, it would not only be uncomfortable, but painful, since I was a long way from my car. "You know, that's very nice of you," I said, reluctantly taking his cutout t-shirt and quickly putting it on, primarily because two guys slowed down as they ran past and started ogling me. "But I don't know you, and I'm not stupid enough to hit on a stranger even if he seems like a real gentleman." "You're wise beyond your years," he grinned, taking me by the elbow away from the treadmill. "But I have a solution. Do you have your cell phone with you?" "No, just my ID and car keys," I replied, finally noticing how big and very handsome this guy was, since I was practically swimming in his shirt and it hung down to my knees. "Then use mine," he said, pulling out a small backpack that was hidden in his shirt and encased his really nice abs, not that I noticed. "Call a friend and tell them Bill Vanderbeek is giving you a ride," he said, holding out his phone to me with one hand and showing me his driver's license with his name on it with the other. "You can also tell them my license plate number when we get to it." His words made sense. His broad smile on his handsome face made me feel trusting. "Okay, Bill Vanderbeek," I smiled back, snuggling up to his driver's license to make sure that was the name on it. "You're very kind and chivalrous. A true paladin." Of course, I wasn't going to call Jack with this information, but I did call Jill. When she started to ask 20 questions, I interrupted her. "I'm just calling in case he turns out to be an axe murderer, so at least my spirit knows that the guy who killed me is going to jail." I laughed in front of a smiling Bill, ending the conversation and handing the phone back to Bill. We chatted as we walked. I didn't jog for the aforementioned reason, to his car, which was thankfully less than half a kilometer away. "Call your friend again and give her the license plate number," he smiled, pointing to it. I pretended to want to call Jill again but didn't see the need to, and then handed him the phone back. Bill was very friendly and talkative as he drove me to my car, located 3 miles down the road along the running track. He minded his own business and was forthright with information about himself, so I probably revealed more about myself than I should have, including my full name, Denise Richards. "Celebrity relative?" he inquired when I told him my name. "No, I'm not good enough to be true," I grinned. "Don't underestimate yourself," he replied seriously, and then changed the subject lightly. When we got to my car, I thanked him profusely and started to take off my t-shirt. "Just keep it on. You might need to get out of the car on the way home and you don't want to induce a heart attack," he hummed. "Thanks, I guess," I hummed back. "But I don't want to steal your t-shirt. What's your wife or girlfriend going to say?" I regretted the last question as soon as it came out. Obviously, it was a fishing question. "I'm not currently attached to her," he grinned. "If we meet again, you can have her back. I run on this same track almost every Saturday morning, starting at about 10, he said. "Okay. Thanks again, Bill Vanderbeek." I smiled as I closed his car door and got into mine. Gentleman that he was, he waited until my car started before pulling away. I saw him pull another t-shirt out of his gym bag in the back seat before he drove off. It bothered me that I was thinking about my savior as I drove home, and it bothered me even more that I was anticipating Jack's reaction, and I hoped he wouldn't be home when I arrived. Unfortunately, he was home. When I walked into the apartment wearing a knee-length Northwestern University volleyball t-shirt, his eyes got big. "Where did you get that t-shirt?" he asked. "My bra strap ripped while jogging, and a guy was kind enough to stop and give it to me so I could cover up with it so I wouldn't have to put on a show," I replied, trying to smile. "I bet you put on quite a show for him," he muttered, and then proceeded to ask questions and make comments, assuming I was out for a run with predetermined plans to meet and have sex with guys. I became enraged. I slammed the master bedroom door shut, locked it, and took a long shower, hoping to cool off. While I did cool down, the time spent in the shower also helped me put things in perspective. Jack was nowhere near like the guy I'd married. I'd been loyal to him while he was in prison. Now I was essentially supporting him, and in return, I was getting jealousy, unfounded accusations. I realized for the first time, or at least I admitted it to myself for the first time, that I no longer loved him and that my thoughts of divorce were justified. The broken bra strap was like the last straw on the camel's back. After a frosty weekend, I went to see my divorce attorney, Susan B. Lowe. As always, and to be expected, it was bad news for that spouse who wants out and makes the most money, male or female. Even though Jack and I maintained a separate household, I bought a condo and paid all the bills, he would get half of everything and I would have to pay him alimony for at least 2 years. I didn't like that scenario. My mind kept racing with thoughts of how to get out of this situation, even after Jack gave me a token apology. I pretended to accept it and actually let him make love to me. This was more bad news. I had only resigned myself to the program and fantasized that it was Bill with me, not Jack. The following Saturday, I pulled into the parking lot where Bill's car had been parked the previous week as he drove me home. I was doing stretches when he arrived at 9:52 a.m. He smiled broadly when he saw me. I handed him back his washed shirt. He took off the one he was wearing, exposing his gorgeous upper body again, and put on his Northwestern volleyball shirt. "I didn't want to tell you last time, but this is my favorite shirt, the only one I still have from my college volleyball days, so I'm really glad I got it back," he smiled. "How could I not return it when you were so kind?" I smiled back. "Why don't you join me for a run?" he asked, doing a little stretch. "I won't be able to keep up with you," I replied. "You looked like you were walking pretty fast before your closet malfunction last week, and you have a sturdy jogging bra now, don't you?" He laughed. "Yes, I do," I growled falsely. We both laughed. "Look, let's get started, and if one of us is too fast for the other, we'll just split up. No big deal," he replied. I was very pleased that, although unlikely, his comment was polite enough to allow that I might be faster and in better shape than he was. We ran my usual 6 miles together, chatting almost the entire way. I really liked this guy. When we finished the 6-mile loop, he said, "I'm going to run a couple more miles. Will I see you here again next week?" "Maybe," I smiled. "Thanks for the company. I hope I didn't keep you too long." "It was fine," he smiled before walking away. In fact, everything was perfect. He knew I was married and clearly respected that, so he didn't hit on me during our run. He also didn't stare at my breasts, although he did notice them, and was a great conversationalist. He was smart, interesting, pleasant to be around, and also had a good job. He was an administrative law judge. I met Jill for lunch as soon as I showered after my Saturday morning run. I told her about my predicament. I didn't love Jack anymore, but I didn't want to get burned by the divorce. She laughed when I finished my tale of woe. "What's so funny, silly?" I snapped playfully. "I kept wondering when you were going to get that albatross off your neck, especially after that weird Bill Vanderbeek guy called me last weekend," she laughed. "What was that all about anyway?" "Don't," I grinned. "So you think my situation is funny?" "No. In fact, I came up with a solution for you a long time ago and have been waiting for an opportunity to enlighten you," she sniggered. That shocked my hairs. So wow me with it? You're buying lunch? She giggled, sipping her wine. Yes. If your plan is worth it, I replied. Oh, it's worth it. Yes, it is, she hummed. She was right. The predicates that made Jill's plan a real possibility were as follows. I have a job that is almost piecework, and 90% of the time I can, if I want to, work alone, with no face-to-face contact with clients or coworkers. I write grants for nonprofit organizations, and I'm good at it, really good at it. Jill works at a pharmacy and meets a doctor who is crazy about her and would do anything for her except kill her. She's a bit of a commitment phobe and plays the underdog, which makes her even more attractive to 32-year-old Dr. Philip Burton. Jack is not honest, and his dishonesty is predictable. In fact, most of his character traits are predictable. Jack couldn't be as loyal to me as I am to him if our situations were reversed and I was in jail. My apartment has a large guest bedroom, with a private bath and cable TV, the only room on the 3rd floor. Jill and I have another close friend, Beth, who works as a makeup artist. My family will do anything to help me leave Jack since they think he's an even bigger albatross than Jill. Jill's plan was simple in concept but probably difficult to execute. However, because I was properly motivated, I was confident that I could pull it off. In the first part of my plan, I started coughing frequently next to Jack. This annoyed him, and he kept wondering if I had some contagious disease, which deterred his loving entreaties. In addition, I put some Band-Aid-like products that my makeup artist friend Beth had prepared for me on visible areas of my skin to make it look like I had lesions. At the same time, I moved most of my money, all but about $15,000, into new brokerage accounts and left Jack with information, including account numbers and computer passwords, about the $15,000 that remained readily available, while I hid all information about the new accounts. I exercised only when Jack was doing one of his chores, and on Saturday mornings I pretended to go to Jill or several doctors to find out what was wrong with me, even though I was actually going for a jog or bike ride with Bill. After about a month of pre-implementation, I got serious about Jill's plan. I had a month to seriously implement it, and if it didn't work as planned, I would still divorce Jack, accept the consequences, and, depending on how he reacted to the implementation of the plan, maybe be kind and magnanimous when I did it. On my last Saturday run with Bill before the plan began in earnest, as we were dousing ourselves with sweat after an intense jog, I got bolder than I'd ever been in my life. Tell me, Bill, I said, nonchalantly taking a sip of water from the bottle. If I weren't married, would you have a romantic, or at least a love interest, in me? As I asked this question, I made intense eye contact, though outwardly I remained impassive, taking occasional sips from my bottle, though inside I was seething. Bill stopped. He didn't break eye contact with me. Are you and your husband getting a divorce? Yes. I won't see you on our now regular jogs or bike rides for at least a month, but the next time I see you, I'll already be separated and in the process of divorce, I replied as casually as possible. I then tossed my empty water bottle into a nearby trash can and came within a few inches of his hard body. When my 5'6" was next to his 6'4", I raised my head and said, "Answer my question. Be honest. Don't embellish or be polite. Would you be interested in a romantic or loving relationship with me if I weren't married?" Although Bill is usually chatty, in this situation he appeared to be a bit verbose. He lifted me off the ground, taking my lips in a seductive kiss. When he lowered me back to the ground, his only words were, "Yes." "Then give me your cell phone number," I said, trying to be as calm as possible, even though my mind was a mess and endorphins were raging through my body. Bill walked over to my car, which I opened to get bottled water, took my phone and entered his number into contacts. Then, handing me the phone, the always polite, respectful, gentlemanly Bill leaned over and whispered in my ear, "If you call me when you're separated or divorced, the first time I see you, I'll make love to you." Then, without further ado, he turned, got into his car, and drove off, leaving me with a flushed face and shaking legs. As I drove to Jill's house to shower, change, and reapply my damage before returning home, I repeated at least 1,000 times to myself, "Well, that was clear enough, wasn't it?" while periodically trying to dry myself off with a workout towel. When I got home from Jill's, I had a completely pissy look on my face and crocodile tears in my eyes. "What happened?" asked Jack when he saw me. "I finally found a doctor who diagnosed my problem," I moaned. "And what is it?" asked Jack hopefully. "It's a rare condition the doctor called debilitating lesion syndrome. He said there's no cure, there's almost no literature on it, there's no research, and the few patients who have been diagnosed with it have a life expectancy of 2 agonizing years after diagnosis," I mumbled, before making the best attempt at pretend crying of my life. Of course, there is no such thing as debilitating lesion syndrome, although Dr. Burton was kind enough to write an article about it that looks like it was taken from a scientific medical journal, and it outlines in technical terms all of my symptoms and describes what awaits someone with this fake disease. As I continued to cry, I held out Dr. Burton's article to Jack, which had matching tear stains on it. I curled up and continued to fake sob while Jack read the article. When he seemed to get halfway through, he collapsed onto the couch, and the article fell out of his hands. "Here's the punishment," he muttered at least a dozen times. I pretended to try to regain my composure. "It's not going to be easy for you, Jack, but I hope you'll support me for the rest of my time, like I did when you were in prison, although there's more bad news. Some of the damage is now on my body, and we won't be able to have sex anymore." With those words, I pulled up my skirt and showed off the little fake defeat Beth had prepared for me. Jack got a disgruntled look on his face, excused himself, and left for the bathroom. I heard the sounds of vomiting. "Probably won't take a month," I grinned to myself. The whole next week I was very busy. I moved into a bedroom on the 3rd floor of my apartment, told Jack I quit my job because I felt too sick to work, told everyone at work to only communicate with me via email while Jack was home, brought home sugar pills with labels that looked like prescription drugs delivered by a colleague of Jill's from the pharmacy she worked at, and while Jack was home, I even had Dr. Burton make a grim house call. I also demanded a lot of Jack's time when he was around, asking him to run small errands for me, coughing while doing so, and my fake lesions became more and more numerous and visible on more and more areas of my body. I never said I was hungry while Jack was around, mostly because after making sure he wasn't, using the locator app on mine and his phones, I'd go out for a big meal or ask Jill to bring a bunch of goodies. I had lost a little weight, but not enough to look empty, so I covered up as best I could when Jack was around. I was surprised when 2 weeks later Jack was still around, even though he was clearly under a lot of stress. I was also surprised that my classes were much more boring and difficult than I had imagined. And I wasn't sure I could keep it up for much longer, especially since Jack was starting to work intermittently. It was time for the most disgusting thing I'd ever done. Dr. Barton called home. Of course, Jack answered. He looked in on me as I pretended to be asleep. Phil Barton said to Jack, "Since it's important, she's given me permission to share her medical information with you. And since she's unavailable and I'm going out of town for a few days, could you give her a message?" "Yes, of course," Jack replied. I listened to the intercom conversation in my room with the mute button pressed. "Please tell Denise that her latest blood work shows that unfortunately the disease is progressing as I suspected and she may soon lose control of her bodily functions," Phil continued in a solemn voice. Jack sighed heavily. "Does that mean she won't be able to use the bathroom?" "Yes. I'm afraid she won't be able to periodically, so you'll need to be prepared to wash her sheets regularly and make sure she cleans up after herself, or her afflictions could get worse." I thought I heard the phone drop. Apparently Jack had picked it up and, muttering, "I'll tell her," ended the conversation. Then came the really repulsive part. About an hour after the call from Phil, I intentionally crapped my pants. I called Jack on the intercom. When he walked into the room, he could smell what had happened. I was crying. "I don't know what happened, honey. I've never done this before. I feel so worthless. I'll clean myself up as best I can, and then I'll give you the sheets. Can you put new ones on the bed?" A look of longing and hopelessness appeared on his face. He nodded his head. "I'll go to the bathroom, and then I'll call you on the intercom when the sheets and nightgown are out the door and I'm in the shower, okay?" Jack nodded his head and left. It was really disgusting to clean up after myself, but I made sure the stains were visible on the sheets and underwear when I put them outside the bathroom door. I then called Jack on the intercom and went into the shower. I stayed in the shower until I was sure Jack was gone. When I came out in my new nightgown, the bed was made. It wouldn't pass the military inspection, but it was fine for my purposes. Not much time passed after the incident. 2 days later, when Jack came into my room while I was pretending to be asleep, he left a piece of paper on the night table and then quietly slipped away. I quickly snatched it up and read it. "Dear Denise, I'm sorry to have to do this, but I'm leaving. I took the $14,900 that was in your brokerage account, but I left the money spent from your last paycheck in your bank account. You can sell the condo to pay your medical bills. Like I said, I'm sorry, but I can't deal with your illness. Your pain is my pain. I hope the end comes quickly for you. Love, Jack." Although I had expected it, indeed hoped for it, now that it was actually happening, it hurt. "What an asshole!" I screamed to myself, and then threw the bedside clock at the wall, shattering it to pieces. I waited until the next morning before going downstairs. I made sure Jack was gone. Most of his clothes and anything that could be easily carried and of value had obviously gone with him in his pickup truck. I didn't waste any time. Over the next 3 days, I went back to work, issued a warrant for his arrest for theft, just to make sure I had real bargaining power if he ever decided to come back, and filed for divorce. In the divorce petition, I listed several grounds, including irreconcilable differences, adultery — Beth swore she saw him entering a motel with an apparent cheater the week before he left — and abandonment, using his goodbye letter as a substitute for the usual 1-year waiting period to file for abandonment. Once things were back to normal, it was time for some fun, distraction, and relaxation. I called Bill's cell phone around 7 o'clock Thursday night. "This is the same Denise Richards," came the low voice on the other end. Obviously, my name had popped up on the caller ID. "Well, maybe the second best," I giggled. "Does this call mean you're separated?" "Yes, divorce papers have already been filed and my soon-to-be ex-husband has left for parts unknown. Even though you rudely said goodbye to me the last time we saw each other," I continued, giggling. "I'm giving you the okay and asking you to come to dinner with me on Saturday. Let me think about it. Denise, Saturday, dinner. Okay, sounds like a plan. No reservations, though. We'll just find some place. And since you invited me, I assume you'll pick me up." "You could be a gentleman and pick me up?" I giggled again. I had never giggled before. What was wrong with me? "I'd like to show you my place and have a couple drinks beforehand. Why don't you come over around 4:30? "What? You want to get to the restaurant in time to get the senior citizen discount?" This time I didn't giggle, but laughed. "No, but I have a big house and lots of booze." "Okay, since I called, I should take you in. What's your address?" Saturday. I was like a little kid before Christmas. I got a massage, facial, pedicure, manicure, soaked in a hot bath, shaved my legs. I arrived at Bill's suburban home at 4:15, but I didn't want to look too naive, so I planned to just sit in the car until 4:35. However, he must have seen me and got out. Opening my car door, he said with a wide smile, "Are you lost, girl? Want some candy?" "Hi," I blushed. "Traffic was lighter than I thought, and I didn't want to arrive while you were getting dressed," I blurted out somehow, proud of my quick thinking. "I thought that maybe you were embarrassed that you were so excited to arrive early," he grinned. "Asshole," I growled falsely. I have to leave right now. Please don't. I have some great wine I want you to try, he smiled. We chatted easily as I walked with him to his house. We hadn't been inside for more than 30 seconds when his demeanor changed. Denise, I have to be honest. I've really missed you and haven't thought about anything else but you since we broke up, which was about a month ago, he said in a completely serious tone. He then walked over to me, took me in his arms, and began to kiss my lips, neck, and cheeks tenderly. I responded to his advances as best I could. Then we had sex many times, and then when we hugged, he said, "We can't live on sex. Do you want something to eat?" Things with Bill and my divorce moved quickly. My lawyer found a friendly judge who was furious that Jack absconded with $15,000 of my money, and the divorce went quickly and easily. The money he absconded with is all he will ever get. I didn't get the police to actively pursue an arrest warrant for Jack because I didn't want to see him again. I just wanted him out of my life again. As for Bill, I'm still in shock that he didn't have a wife. I could never understand how a successful, intelligent, kind, generous, handsome, 31-year-old, my age, guy like him was not in a relationship. However, now that we've been married for 3 years and I'm 7 months pregnant, I've stopped looking a gift horse in the mouth, and he still makes love to me every day, although, given my condition, more cautiously than he did that first time. I keep the bra with the broken strap as my most treasured souvenir, the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. The end! Subscribe to my channel! Thank you!